So, one example as we dive into healing the past, there's a couple reasons why we would want to do that. And the example that I'm going to use as a metaphor is trees. So if you cut a tree trunk, you know how you can count the rings inside to tell the age of the tree. So you can see when the tree was, if I do this, 10 years old, 20 years old, 30 years old, 50 years old, 100 years old, right? And the same thing is true for humans. Even though you can't cut me open and see rings, inside of me still lives the experiences of being a baby, of being 5, of being 20, of being 28. All of those live within us. So it makes sense that the past can affect us. And if the past is still affecting us in a way that we don't like, in a way that triggers us emotionally, and we would like it to trigger us in a different way, it's just because our brains have a connection to them. So we have experiences, it creates a neural pathway in our brain, and it's still very much connected. And that seems annoying because you're like, oh, I don't want that connection anymore. But that's actually really awesome because we know that our brains are very plastic. And when I say plastic, I mean that we can change them. And we can change them a lot easier than we've thought in the past. We used to think that once your brain was developed, that was it. There was no changing it. And the truth is now there's thousands of scientific studies that show the types of practices that we've been doing for the last 6 days and that we'll do today change the gray matter, the white matter, the size of the different parts of our brain. So they increase the prefrontal cortex and the hippocampus, which is the part that we are thinking really well with. They decrease the amygdala, which is the stress response that we have. You can change your neural pathways, so you can rewire your brain to connect and have an emotional response the way that you choose. This sounds really complicated, right? But again, you've been doing this all week as you have followed in all of these practices, the active practices of listening, videos, audios, and also the journaling. So you're already doing it. You may have already created changes in your brain by doing practices the last 5 days. So don't feel like, oh, I'm not a neuroscientist or I don't know how to do this. That's why I'm here. I'm here because I know how to do this and I've been educated in this and it's not as difficult as it seems. And instead of selling you a product or telling you to take a supplement every day to change something for you, I'm giving you the tools. So you will be able to continue this. The only thing you need is yourself. And that's fucking empowering, if you ask me. So, off my soapbox, here we go. So the types of things that might still affect us, like if I was in a car accident, maybe it would affect me in a physical pain way, in when I'm driving and I see the same car that I got in an accident with, maybe I feel anxious or need to pull over, things like that. We remember inside our tree rings, we have even feeling humiliated in kindergarten or standing in front of someone in a spelling bee in 5th grade and we get the answer wrong and we feel maybe a little bit embarrassed or shameful. It could be like the example from the other day when our teacher told us that we weren't good enough, we weren't a good leader. All of these things that happen, and trauma is subjective. Our experiences are subjective. So something that I experience and you experience in the exact same situation, or even if we are together, is going to affect you and I in different ways. For example, I'm from Alaska. Alaska has a lot of earthquakes. Colorado does not. If there is an earthquake right now, I might feel pretty calm about it, know what to do, not feel in danger. Someone else in the same house might be really, really concerned because they've lived in Colorado their whole lives and didn't experience earthquakes like me. So same situation, same house, same natural disaster, 2 different people having very different experiences. So I say that to just give you permission to feel whatever you feel. We don't control the emotions that come up. We control our responses to them. And that's what we're practicing today, is the stepping out of the judgment into the curiosity, which leads us to being able to accept and give compassion to when I feel humiliated or when I feel scared or when I feel angry. Emotions are neutral. until we judge them. There's no bad emotion, good emotion, wrong emotion, right emotion. Emotions are completely neutral. They're just different peptides in our body. And it's when we judge them that we create that resistance. When I hate the hate, it creates more of it. Okay? When I hate the fear, it creates more resentment on top of the fear, on top of the hate. When I accept it and get curious about it and invite it in, that's when it transforms. And I know we've talked about that a lot this week as well. So it's super exciting that we are so able and empowered to be able to do that. So, long story short, obviously we can't go back in the past and change what we've experienced. That's what happened. But what we can do is change our emotional response to it. And the way that we do this is by getting in touch with the pain first and practicing compassion at the same time. And in neuroscience, this is called memory reconsolidation. Memory reconsolidation. So what that means is I'm rewriting my emotional response. I'm changing the way it's wired in my brain so that if I think of that memory or something triggers me to think of that memory, instead of having a panic attack because it's so painful, I'm going to use these practices to rewire it and then meet it with compassion and say, man, that sucked. I'm glad I'm not there anymore. I'm glad I'm here in this present moment. So that's cool. Memory reconsolidation. That's what we're doing. The memory remains, but we get to decide how we feel about it. We are in control. That's a pretty big deal. If we bring up a memory, the pain, without compassion, then what we're doing is essentially reliving that suffering. And it's actually strengthening the wire of suffering in our heads. So without the compassion and just thinking of the memory, and this is part of why talk therapy, in the sense of just sitting down and telling someone and venting over, and it's okay to vent, but the more we do it, the more we choose to live there, we're solidifying that traumatic experience in our brains, and the pain can actually get worse. So that's not a recommended practice. If we bring up compassion, like the cultivating joy or the sending and receiving compassion practices, those are helpful because what that does is it increases our ability to regulate emotions and increases joy, but it doesn't transform any of the triggers. So it's definitely positive, but when we're talking about healing the past and wanting to have a different response to our emotional triggers, it's not going to change that. So that's why it's important to have both of those things. To to connect to the suffering and the pain in a way just enough that we're feeling the sensation, not enough that it's overwhelming. And then to have the active compassion practice together. That's what's going to change your brain. That's what's going to change your response. That's what's going to change your life. So any questions on that? Feel just jump in if you guys have questions about that. So what I want to do is just lead a practice today. And this training isn't going to be super long. I just wanted to explain those things to you guys and then lead a practice and then talk a little bit about going deeper and tell you again about the Befriend Your Body program that starts on Wednesday. And then we'll be done and that'll be a wrap. And I know that a lot of people might want to go back and redo or catch up with some of the practices. That's totally fine. This group will be up for a while and all the trainings are there. So gosh, I've had a magical week. I can't wait to hear about what you guys, doing these practices with you guys and teaching them and really like grounding myself in them, it has completely changed everything for me. So, and I know a lot of you who have reached out have told me that too. So I can't wait to hear even more. Okay. So if you don't have a piece of paper and a pen, if you can right now, grab one so that you have it for this practice. I'm going to lead you through it. Similar to the other day when we did it live, I'll lead you through it and then afterwards I'll post the directions so you can go back to it and you can follow along with this video and go deeper and really focus on yourself as well. The example that I'm going to use is a true example about me, so I'm going to be vulnerable and share with you guys. If you don't know already, when I was a child, I was sexually abused for many years. So healing the past practice, my example, I was sexually abused as a child. And what that taught me, the message I learned, was that being sexual is harmful. So now, this isn't true now, but in the past, I had a hard time connecting to my sexuality with someone else. I would feel frozen and escape my body instead of staying present with the person when it was an intimate situation. So that's what I experienced, and that was what the outcome of it was. So right now, just think of something that happened to you in the past and how it might be affecting you now. So for example, my parents didn't come to my after school activities, and now I feel like I'm not really worth anyone's time, or I'm not lovable. My mom used to critique the clothing that I wore, and now I feel like I'm unattractive. Or the bus driver used to tell me that I was late every day, and now I feel like I can't hold down a good job because I can't be on time. Sometimes it's like a critical voice in our heads that comes from something else. My PE teacher told me I was not very fast at running, and now I don't identify as an athlete, but I really want to play basketball. So there's several examples that I'll throw out for you. So hopefully you have an example now to go with. Even if it doesn't have to be like a big deal. If nothing's coming to you, just choose something. So as you are beginning this practice, just find a place where you can be still and comfortable. And if it feels right for you, I encourage you to close your eyes. And as you access that example that you thought of, and tune in to that suffering or that sensation. Again, not enough that it feels overwhelming, but just enough that you're feeling the emotion. Notice what the emotion is. Notice where in your body you feel it, maybe in specific places or a place. Maybe it's a general all over feeling. And as you're noticing what that experience of suffering from that one thing is like, set the intention that this practice is not to let the suffering go, but instead to accept it as our experience, instead to explore it with curiosity and invite it in versus forcing it out. And for now, you can just say out loud, describe the experience. Describe what experience you thought of, just in a couple sentences. Describe the emotion, describe the body sensations. If you're watching this recording, you can pause the video now and do journaling. Either way is fine, your choice. And now that you've described the experience and you're connected to what it's like, what it feels like, think of the first time you remember feeling this way. It doesn't have to be the first time you ever felt this way if you don't remember that. Just whenever the first time you do remember feeling this emotion or maybe this sensation in your body before. And go ahead and say out loud when that was, the first time you remember that. And in that memory, you were a specific age. So without going back to the event itself, just picture yourself at the age of the memory. So nobody else is there, just your present self looking at your past self at the age of what you were in this memory. And as you connect with your past self, notice what your face looks like. Notice any feelings that come up as you're observing your past self. And describe out loud the emotions that you have and what you feel like saying to your past self. Don't think too hard. Just what are the first things that you want to say as you connect with your past self? And notice if what you want to say feels angry or blaming or indifferent, then stop this practice now, and then you would go back to day 4 of when compassion is difficult. Okay? If your response and what you want to say feels compassionate and kind, then allow yourself to express that to your past self. So within that scene of your present self, observing your past self, let them know using your words, your actions. You can give hugs, you can look at them with love, whatever feels good to you to express the compassion and the love and the kindness that you're feeling for your past self. Go ahead and do that. And as you're doing that, notice how your past self responds. Is it easy for them to accept and receive your affection? Do they seem a little uncomfortable at first? Can you reassure them? What is it like? Again, no judgment, just curiosity, just witnessing, just observing. And then describe out loud what happened during that exchange. For example, I said, "I see you. It makes sense that you're upset. Can I give you a hug?" My past self seemed a little hesitant to receive it at first, but then accepted it within a couple seconds. When I hugged my past self was tense at first, and as the hug went on, seemed to relax in my arms. Whatever happened during that exchange. And within that conversation, an exchange that you're having with your past self, just continue the dialogue, continue the conversation, continue the interaction until you're absolutely positive that your past self accepts your compassion, that they're receiving it. And then continue to express the compassion when they're receiving it for several minutes, as many as you would want. And as you're giving that compassion and kindness and love, notice any sensations in your body as you practice. Maybe your breath slows down, maybe your tension drops, maybe some pain goes away, maybe not. Every sensation is okay. There's no right or wrong, there's no bad or good. It just is in this moment. As you're expressing compassion to your past self and continuing that interaction, some phrases that you could use to give compassion, if you want some ideas, would be to look at your past self and sincerely say, "May you be happy. May you be healthy. You deserve to be safe. You are loved. You are totally lovable. You do not deserve to be treated poorly. You do not deserve to be unhappy. You are magic. You belong to the world. People are excited to have you here. You are beautiful." So you can use any types of affirmations or messages of kindness and love and compassion that it seems like your past self might want to know, or maybe they don't know and you would like them to know now. So in your practice, you can take as much time as you want to continue being with your past self. And if this feels helpful and transformative to you, go back to that. Go back to yourself repeatedly until you meet it and it feels excited and there's no more of that suffering present. And then move on to something else. You can use this practice over and over and over again. So for now, if you're watching the recording, you can pause the video and continue. Or if you're here live with me, do whatever you need to let your past self know that they are loved and important, and that you will come back to them shortly or later, and that they matter. And as you're letting them know, I'll see you later, in whatever way, take a deep breath in. And on your exhale, start to feel the surface beneath you again. Start to feel your body and your breath and your sensations. Maybe wiggle your toes, wiggle your fingers. And when you're ready, come fully back to this space and open your eyes if they were closed. I almost feel like I can sense other people when I'm leading these, even though it's on the video. It's like this universal energy, and even when I'm not fully in the practice and I'm leading it, it like still creates a lot of relief and joy within me. So that's really cool. Let me know how that was for you. However you want. You can use some words or some phrases in the comments. Well, I'm going to talk about going deeper. So these practices are related because there's, so sometimes we need to simply embrace our suffering with compassion and things can change. And sometimes there's a deeper understanding that we need to have so that we can give it attention for that change to happen. So to be able to A, be aware of what that deeper cause is, and B, to transform it, we have to have a practice of active inquiry. We have to ask good questions and meaningful questions and be curious about it. So that's what going deeper is about. A relief. Yay! I'm glad it feels like a relief. I feel that too. So there's three main ways to deepen your practice, or three main things that we would listen to. Number one is suffering in the body. So specific physical sensations that have not gone away after we practice embracing suffering. We need to ask those specific pains in our body more questions. Number two is listening to your past self, which is the practice that we just did, that there's some experience that we have from the past that we want to hear from, that we want to ask questions to. So the practice that we just did, you can apply the questions that I'm going to give you in a moment. If you're feeling unsure, you can continue that dialogue with your past self and continue giving compassion, but also ask some of these inquiries to go a little bit deeper. And the third one is parts of yourself. And what that looks like is if while you practice, you feel extra distracted or resistant, where you're just kind of pushing the practice away, or you have thoughts that you just can't seem to let go of or allow to dissipate, that part of ourselves is not joining the practice. So we want to talk to that part of ourselves. And the questions that we would ask are things like, what is your job? So, hey, part of me that isn't wanting to engage in this practice right now, I see you, I acknowledge you. Can you tell me what your job is? Can you tell me how you're trying to help? Same thing with the pain in your body. If I have pain in my right knee, for example, I would really be aware of that, connect to it, feel the sensation. I would say, hey, pain in my right knee, I feel you, I'm here with you. How are you trying to help me? Usually it's some form of protection that comes up. Another question is, what do I need to know? So I'm in the practice, I'm talking to my 5-year-old self. I want to know, 5-year-old self, what is it that you want me to know right now? maybe that past self wasn't able to tell somebody else what they felt like they needed to know, or they weren't heard when they tried to. And the last question is, what do you need from me? So pain in my right knee, what is it that you need from me? It might be an action. Like, for example, this weekend I was supposed to go to Missouri, and I had a commitment that I was supposed to do, and it just really didn't feel good. It felt super stressful. I felt almost like this paralyzed feeling, and as I sat with my practice of self-compassion, I said, what do you need from me? And my body was like, this paralyzed feeling said, I need to not have to leave. I need to have the freedom of taking care of myself first. And so even though it was very difficult, I ended up not going, and that paralyzed feeling completely dissipated, which is how I ended up in this mansion doing amazing work and feeling really expansive and loving myself, and it completely changed everything. So it's amazing how quickly, and the messages that we might access when we choose to go deeper by having an active inquiry practice. I'm going to copy and paste those questions into the chat box, and of course I'll give them to you guys later too. So those same questions will be used for body pain, so physical pain, your past self, or your parts of self. So all three of those. And that's how you would go deeper. And that's essentially what I have for you guys in this series. I really packed it full. I know it was kind of an intensive in that way, where there's a lot of practices that you can revisit, a lot of layers that you can use. Maybe some things have completely changed. So at the beginning, when I was inviting people to do this challenge, I said, expect magic. And I meant that. I really meant that, because there's amazing things that happen when we have these discoveries and we can respond to them. Not just what I shared from my weekend, but the things that you guys have been sharing. Pain that you've had for years that doctors can't describe, that you're getting in touch with, that are starting to dissipate, that you're starting to understand why. Beliefs and experiences that you've held since childhood that you didn't realize were there, that were essentially controlling your behavior, that now that you know, you can rewire your emotional response to and make a different choice. And sometimes even just one choice changes your entire life. And that's extremely powerful, which is why I'm so excited to be doing this work, and so excited to invite you guys to join us to continue